is good, but it certainly will be used for good because it's also synchronistic with the way things are changing, the ways in which we have to adapt, the ways in which we can't control the outcome, but we can do things differently to see our way into a new world order. But you know what? The new world order comes on the heels of the death of the
Wow. And when you said it, there's a couple things that popped into my mind when you said change and bringing in this new. Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Healing Element Podcast. I'm your host, Kai Marie. So excited to have you join me tonight. I have a very special guest, Deborah Singletary, and she has many different expertise, and we'll go over what exactly that is. But I'm really excited to have her here because she's also my yoga astrology teacher. So I'm excited to have this conversation with her, and the information she has provided to me was amazing. It really helped me to learn more in depth about astrology and our connection to the cosmos. So I couldn't think of a better person to have this conversation with tonight. So tonight we're going to be talking about the winter solstice and just how, as the seasons change, how that can help us on our own personal journey, how you can kind of use the different seasons to help you begin to maybe heal, maybe start new patterns of healing, if that's something that you are interested into. So first, I want to introduce you to my guest tonight. I'm going to read her bio. Deborah has served as an astrological consultant for people going through changes that are desirable or unwelcome for over 40 years. An artist and interfaith minister, in 1986, she founded Vision Carriers. In 1986, was a way of organizing her diverse interests. Deborah believes that people tap into their minds and hearts by their hands and fingers, sometimes even more than with words. Her exhibition credits include the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture's major show, Black New York Artists of the 20th Century. Her publication credits include The New Yorker and Painting from the Source, Harper Row. Welcome, Deborah, to the Healing Element Podcast.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is just a fun conversation, but one that can be helpful to people who are, on their journey. Maybe, one thing during this season that we're in, a lot of us are still kind of unable to kind of go out and enjoy the weather when it was a little bit warmer out. And now we're going into the winter months. So it can really seem like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even get to enjoy the summer. Now it's getting cold. So hopefully with our conversation tonight, people can take this as, not kind of like a sad thing about it getting colder, but what can I do to be productive during these colder months that can be beneficial to me during this time. So before we jump into that, I just wanted to see if we can talk a little bit about the solstices, just so people kind of get an understanding of what that is. We can kind of dive into more about healing.
So at the winter solstice, the days and the nights are exactly equal. So as the time continues, there's more daylight hours than evening hours. And then it comes to a meeting point, almost like when you're driving a car and you're getting ready to make a turn, you kind of slow down. You have to, get some equanimity in that flow. You don't go speed ahead. You slow down. before you speed up again. So we're kind of at that slowing down point, which many people experience as loss. Certainly, there's the loss of the heat, as you mentioned, and there's the loss of the leaves on the tree, and it would appear that things are dying. And so often and there's the loss of the actual light. And so often when we have a season like that, we feel depressed or sad. And we might even think that something is wrong with us, when those feelings are a natural process that is initiated by the sun going into Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. And the symbolism of Capricorn has to do with reality. And when and in Capricorn and with Saturn transits, we start a kind of review. And it's easier, you know, I don't do any review in the summer because
you're going, right?
There.
Right.
You know, I'm running around but when December comes, when the winter comes, you know, you're sort of slowing down and you look around. And metaphorically, we're actually looking around at our lives. And often we're seeing what we don't like. And so that slowing down allows us to feel what we didn't take time to feel when we were so busy.
So it's less distraction. We're not distraction by all the stuff going on. It's helping us to kind of settle in.
Yes. And, you know, and then that's a natural process too, that, you know, that activity. So we're not calling it names, but, you know, we like that too. But everything has its season. You know, it's like a cycle, and then there are cycles within the cycle. And sometimes that even happens periodically in our work. You know, we've attained to a certain comfort maybe at work, a certain stature. You know what it's like when you start a job? I think I remember. And, you know, you're so excited and you're meeting people and there's all this possibility and you're learning where the woman's room is and discovering that there's a kitchen with goodies in it so you could take breaks all during the day. And then you learn the job. And then you say, is that all there is?
Right. Yeah.
You know, what else? And so that, I call it the review period. And often when we're reviewing, we don't like what we review. You know, we may go through it with our relationships. You know, you meet somebody, liking them, on the phone with them, you know, having a good time, maybe strolling through the park, whatever it is one does. And then after a while,
you start to review.
You start to say, you know, the same restaurant, the same cheap restaurant, really. You know, do I want this? Is this good? But it does. And often people are afraid of looking within.
Right.
You know, we're afraid of what we might see. And so very often people avoid it. And maybe they can avoid it season after season, but there's always that time when you cannot avoid looking within and seeing what it is you don't like, or seeing the ways in which you feel stilted and stuck by all this safety. You know, when I was younger, what every parent hoped for their child was, what do you call those jobs? A government job, or a job with benefits.
With the
One of
pension.
them pension, one of them jobs that you could never get fired from. A steady job. A steady job was everything. And then, but after a while, that comfort, that predictability, that security,
Right.
that so-called security can kind of get old. And old is a Capricorn Saturn word.
You know what, when you said, going back to like the relationships, for example, of you're in a relationship and in the beginning everything is great, and then then you start to think about like, I don't know if I like this, or I don't know if I like that, or you start to maybe question things. And also during that time of slow down, when you're reflecting, it also is probably bringing up things kind of like in a relationship, maybe you ignored. So let's say there were like kind of glaring red signs in this relationship that was like, run in the opposite direction. But you're just like, oh, we're going out, we're going here. So you're ignoring all of that. And it kind of makes me think of like, as we're going to this slowdown season, whether you're in a relationship or not, maybe there are things that we know that we had to make changes to, but because we've been distracted by, whatever you've been distracted by, we've kind of have ignored it. And so now in this slowdown period, it's kind of like looking at our face again. And it's like, I gotta make a decision now that I don't want to make.
Yes. And then sometimes, in our lives, difficulties emerge. Or often people come to me, they'll get in a new relationship, for example, and they'll say, I'm in a relationship and he's a Cancer, and what do you think? And I love so much. And I say, well, have you had your first argument yet? Has she been late? Yeah, like what, wait a minute before you actually decide, because everything will get tested.
Right.
Tested is a Capricorn Saturn word. And when I think of taking two strings, let's say I want to wrap a box and I need a longer string. I have two shorter ones. I tie them together. And what do? You don't just tie it together and then wrap the box. You go, and and if it comes apart, that's the good news, because then it means that bond wasn't enduring or wasn't tight enough. And either you retire it or you say, this isn't going to do. And if it holds, that's the good news too. But whether it holds or doesn't, you're always going to feel that tension, that tug, that pull. That is what I think of as being tested.
Yeah, I like how you said that, because then during this reflection period, when that testing occurs, you can then go back and say, okay, this is where I need to make adjustments. So it's not as though during slowdown, it's just kind of like, well, everything's kind of gone to hell, right? It's like, okay, what adjustments can I make to strengthen it? So the challenge that I'm facing, what adjustments do I need to make to overcome or heal or position myself to change maybe the outcome? Does that kind of make sense to along those lines?
As I live and learn, I kind of have a different idea about the outcome. I'm learning that it is not so much the outcome as it is the process. And what I learned to do is see if I can care less about the outcome. Because if I make the outcome, I want to get a promotion, or I want to stay in this relationship forever, and I won't be happy unless I have this, and that's an outcome. We might miss the real encounter with ourselves. Like sometimes we don't want to. We think we know what the outcome should be, but sometimes the outcome is not as good as it would be if we wasn't so invested in what it looks like. In addition to making my life as an astrologer, I'm also an artist. And, my first idea about making art had to do with how it looked.
Mm.
And, so, my expectation would be that it looked whatever. And in trying to control what it looked like, I sometimes missed what it was evolving to be. And that often my ideas about what it should look like
Mm-hmm.
are limited, are more limited than what it can actually become if I listen to the wisdom in the painting process, if I allow it. And in our lives, I'm learning to just to stay present.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what people do these days, but in the olden days, uh, getting married was everything. Like
Mm-hmm.
having a relationship, a job, a job. Let me see, was there anything else? Was you know, you had to get married. And so many people lived to get married, and in living to get married, they missed that reflection that you were talking about early. They were just focused on getting married.
Right.
And then they
Mm-hmm.
got married, and they went from saying, oh God, please, please, please find me a husband, to, oh Lord, please, could you get rid of this man for me? Like, really? Can you make him like kind of like disappear? You know what I mean? Because so it's
Right.
often what we are wanting is our is what has been given to us by the collective,
Mm-hmm.
by the society that says this is what's going to make you happy. And if you're married, I'm not saying marriage is bad. I'm simply saying that as a goal is nothing. It almost eclipses the relationship itself.
Mm-hmm.
What is the relationship? Now,
Right.
which could culminate and flow into a marriage, but when we have that goal of getting married, or that goal of getting a what we call a good job, there are many miserable people in good jobs.
That's true.
And if you have one, you work for, let me see if I can remember what a good job is. Uh,
When you find that out, let me know.
well, like, you work for, like, I've heard, oh, when I think of Oprah Winfrey, in case you don't
Mm-hmm.
know who I mean, in case you think I mean another Oprah. Oprah Winfrey at one point had a job as a news anchor.
Mm-hmm.
And can you imagine her telling her friends, I'm not happy on that job? I
Right.
like, really, Oprah, like, really? How much money you make?
Mm-hmm.
What? You going what? You going to give up that job? You know what I mean? We're
Right.
so much into that status and the security that people say, "Girl, I wouldn't give up my good job if I was you." And she gave
Mm-hmm.
it up at some point for what I thought was okay. Now you have made it. You're on ABC TV with your own talk show,
Mm-hmm.
and then she had the nerve enough to not like to say, not enough. Like, really, Oprah?
Mm-hmm.
Like, really? You're supposed to stay. Everything is supposed to stay put. And that's the way we think of things, as staying put. But, keeping the status quo.
Right. And do you
And
think that staying put is that part of us paying so much attention to the outcome? and
It
not the
could
journey?
be.
Is it
It
kind
could
of
be.
like, because I want this thing to be a certain way.
I want it to be a
So,
certain way.
yeah.
Now, don't y'all go and quit your jobs, and don't call me talk about you need your rent money, okay? But
Deborah told me.
your car payment is due, because I'm not going to know you. I'm not suggesting that people, quit, but that they pay attention to their feelings.
Mm.
And our feelings will very often tell us what we want, but it may start with the negative. It may start with, I don't want, I don't like. And that can be really, really frightening. However, very often, if let's say you are in a relationship, it doesn't mean that if you discover that there are things that you don't like about the relationship that it automatically is going to end. It doesn't mean that. It means it could get better. It could wake up. It could become more expansive. It could become more ideal. But it is our fear of losing that causes us to clutch at even that which we don't like. And we are in some times, and
Yes.
we are in a time of change. Many astrologers are noting the lineup of the planets, and those Capricorn planets along, and Saturn is moving into Aquarius, which is a planet of change. And this is one of the few times we get to really see the change happening. We weren't there back in the Civil War. Like, we didn't get to see what it looked like, what that change looked like, because we weren't there. So we are living in the midst of change. And I dare say we are fortunate enough to be living in the time of change, where the old vanguard, where the old structures are showing signs of wear and tear and being done. And so, one of the things that this change introduced to us by something that seems to be negative to us, and now I'm talking about Mr. or Ms. or they COVID or the COVID, it's been helping. It's actually an instrument of change. Not that I would have chosen that, not that I would have said, I know how we'll make change. Let's get COVID. I'm not suggesting that it in and of itself is good, but it certainly will be used for good, because it's also synchronistic with the way things are changing, the ways in which we have to adapt, the ways in which we can't control the outcome, but we can do things differently to see our way into a new world order. But you know what? The new world order comes on the heels of the death of the one.
And when you said it, there's a couple things that popped into my mind when you said change and bringing in this new system or order, and how COVID was a part of that. From what we can see, it makes me think of, like, on LinkedIn, I've seen a lot of people. This is like early on, so this would have to be like during the spring when things first started to shut down. And I saw so many people posting on LinkedIn who are now working from home. And so many of them were saying, I can spend more time with my children. Like, they ended up like kind of connecting a little bit more with family. Now, I will say some people probably connecting more with family than they care to. So I'm not trying to make it sound like roses and roses and rainbows. But there were some people that were saying, like, I can actually spend more time with my children, spend more time with my spouse, my partner, and not feel like I'm rushing from work, rushing to pick the kids up, rush, like they had a moment to just see what it was kind of like to maybe have at least one meal at home where people weren't running all around. Everyone's in the house, like there's nowhere else to go. So I thought that was astute. Some people are like, you know what? I realize I don't really like my job and I want to start something new in the midst of a pandemic. Who would think, to start something new? But there was this change that was also occurring in the midst of what was seemed as something that it did like shut down, the U.S. as far as our businesses and schools and all the public spaces that we have. But from that, there was something else that was kind of happening within some of the homes of people and the minds of folks saying, you know what, maybe I don't want to do this job forever. Maybe
Yeah. When it becomes time to go back to work,
yes.
people and the bosses say, all right, everybody come back. There are going to be a lot of people who say, no, thank you. I don't think so.
Right.
Or I would prefer to work differently. I think, in the midst of change, number one, when we talk about healing, a healing force is acceptance. That this is what it is right now. I don't like it. I'm really mad at God. Like, really, God? Like, you couldn't do any better than this?
This is what we got.
But to say, I accept. I accept. This is to be able to look at the problem and face it and say, I accept that this is happening. Because what happens is energetically, we are often resisting. And what I mean by energetically is, we're kind of holding ourselves tight and we're resistant and we're angry and we're sort of like thinking that this is the worst thing and we're calling it names and we're blaming it. And now we're really focusing on the problem in a way that it begins to loom even larger because that's all we can see. But once we say, okay, I accept, then our vision begins to shift. And we begin to see perhaps opportunities even in that problem. I used to have people in my home all the time. I was always having one kind of workshop or another, particularly astrology workshops. And I thought, oh my God, I can't teach astrology anymore. And okay, so I'm about to like lie, be a fraud. So let me just say the truth. So here's the truth is, way before COVID, I was saying, I don't know if I'm going to teach astrology anymore because I live in a small apartment. And in order to have a class, I have to move the chair and drag out the table and put something on the wall and, and clean up. And I was thinking like, maybe I'm not going to teach astrology anymore. Well, with COVID, it never occurred to me that I could teach astrology online. I mean, I think people were teaching online, but it seemed something that you had to be like super advanced and have a huge computer in order to be able to do it. It didn't seem accessible to me. And now that I see I can teach through technology, through using the computer, even if I had a large apartment, I might still say, no, never mind. I'll continue to teach on Zoom. And then I could teach people in California and Brazil. I've had international clients. Like, when did I ever have international clients? When I had that idea that for the most part, people had to come to my living room even for a reading. I mean, I often did things over the phone, but that it wasn't satisfying. And so this change, I can see some good in it now. If I could just get myself to exercise and walk more, because that's one of the things that's been hindered for me. And I can't say it has hindered me. I allow it to. So I'm not wanting to present that, oh, this is all wonderful. There are things about it that are difficult and painful, and people have lost loved ones.
Yes.
And, there's been a lot of anger and despair and fear.
It's so true. And everyone's trying to figure out how best to deal with all the changes as, let's say, as an adult. And then if you have little ones, now you're trying to figure out, first of all, as an adult, you're trying to figure out what's going on. And now it's like, how do I explain this thing that I never have gone through before to my child? How do I explain to them why they can't go and play with their children, that we don't know when they're going to go back to school, or what it's going to look like when they go back to school, or they have to wear a mask all day. And so these are all these other changes, which, I'm not a parent, so hopefully this makes sense, but maybe more communication is now happening at home. Like maybe there's more explaining things than before. It was kind of like, just go do this, do that. Like maybe now this presents the opportunity for families to maybe talk a little bit more about what's going on with them in their world, and also how the external world is affecting them. Well,
as I think as parents, it gives us an opportunity. If we are, for example, seized with fear, we know that if we pass that on to our children, that we are giving them a heritage of fear. And so once we realize that we're angry or confused, we have some decisions to make about how we are going to go through it. I'm remembering a time when I had an apartment I loved in Brooklyn that I had been in for 30 years, and it came time to move something out of my powers, it seemed. Although I think everything is always within our power. Maybe we can say more about that later. But at the time, this was like, oh my God, horrible. New York City, and I was paying way beneath market rent as it was. So it wasn't like I was going to be able to find another apartment for $650. I mean, that's how little rent I was paying in Brooklyn. So I told the person I was working for that I was going to have to quit and get a real job, because I was working in the theater. I was having fun. But one thing I vowed, and I wish I could remember the exact phrase I used for myself, but it had to do with going through it with grace. That I began to look forward to telling my children how I went through it. And when I say my children, I don't mean children I've given birth to from my womb, but my nieces and nephews. Like, I knew that I was in that if this was a novel, that this was a turning point, and that I would have to one day say, this is what I did. And I didn't want to say to them, well, I got the news, I had to move. And I said, then I foamed at the mouth, because I'm going to want to shore them up. So I knew that I had to be a model of poise and grace. And saying that helped, just knowing that there was a way to have poise in the face of what was for me a huge problem. I was so disappointed. I got an apartment that I could afford so fast. I was preparing to say, and then I trudged through the snow
You had the
looking for an
story ready.
apartment. And then I banged on the doors and I begged and I worked all night. And then I got a job, please. It was like, oh, bloop, bloop.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in part because I had equanimity in my mind that I knew I didn't know the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I was going to do it with grace and poise.
I love that. You're actually speaking to me right now. So yes, bring it. You are definitely speaking to me right now with that. With doing transition, how are you preparing your mind, and how are you aligning yourself with whatever transition that you're going through? So one thing that I do want to go into, and I'm looking at time because time is going by fast. We're almost at 8:45 already.
No.
Yes. So I want to get into, for people that are either listening now or will be listening after our live session is over, and they're like, okay, now I'm supposed to be reflecting on something in my life, or maybe I can use this as a time of reflection. Are there any type of maybe rituals or practices that they can do during this time to kind of give them a guide on how they can use this period?
I'm looking for my list. I think I made a list. I have some. So in any time, whenever there's confusion or there's despair, one of the first things that I do is I clean out my closets. If I feel out of control and I'm fearful and I don't know what's going to happen, I go through my closets and I pick things up off the floor where half the stuff ends up. I throw things away. I organize it because my sense is that is a way of organizing my mind. That when things are helter-skelter in the world, then I find a place that I can control.
Mm-hmm.
In many cases that I haven't controlled.
Mm-hmm.
My drawers, my junk drawer in the kitchen where I store things, and my cabinets, I make room. And sometimes I'm surprised that I have actually space that had been cluttered. And I see that as a metaphor for what I've been doing with my mind, having my mind cluttered and not even knowing really what I'm thinking because I'm so busy worrying. I don't even know what I'm worrying about. So I find that this cleaning out the closets organizes my mind, and it makes me feel better. And when I drag out that big bag and take it out the house, you can feel the apartment lift.
Yeah.
So it's another way of saying I lighten my load. But there's another. I don't know if it's a ritual. It might be more of an exercise. I find it's very powerful to select something about myself that I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it is my thinning hair, my tendency to cut people off while they're trying to talk.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I didn't do that to you this time. Whether it's my skinny legs. And I write to that part of myself
Wow.
a letter of forgiveness.
That is powerful. Wow.
Yes. And thereby I am accepting. and I'm not resisting, and I become conscious of that which I don't like, which chances are I project onto other people. And I take it as my own. And if I can, I write it a love letter. You know, because if somebody said to me, you know, you don't like your legs, I'll chop, you know, oh yeah, your legs are really skinny and ugly. Ooh, terrible. I say, how dare you? Like, how, you know, who do you think you're, you know, but I think I can do it to myself. So I try to become conscious about things that I don't like. And I don't say, and I'm going to change them. So I take my hand and rub it over my belly and I thank it. And I also understand that it got big because it's trying to help me, it's trying to tell me something. And I say, I'm going to listen to you. You know, tell me what you want. Tell me what you want to eat. Tell me what you want to, you know, and I make peace with that part of myself that I don't like. But, and I think the another thing I'd like to do for fun is to write to an ancestor.
Oh, I love that too.
And sometimes I'll pick an ancestor I don't even know, and I'll say, I'm writing to you, and I don't even know your name. But I know that I come from you and through you. And I write a letter of appreciation to that ancestor. And I'll ask that ancestor if they have anything they want to say to me. And then I'll write and I'll continue writing. And I'm not suggesting that an ancestor literally is talking to me. Maybe they are. You know, I'm not prepared to say that. But what I find is that some of the voices in our heads are not known to us. And very often, even that those voices contain strands of wisdom. And I make a practice of listening to them. But one of my favorite things to do is to go through my house and bless the walls. Now, I live alone, and so there's nobody to say, what you doing? Lord, child, mommy, Debbie's talking through the walls. But, you know, I put my hand on the wall and I just say, like, thank you, you know, because there's so much that we take for granted, and there's so much that we don't like. And my place isn't large enough, and doesn't have enough stuff. And I just say, I go through the entire house and I say, thank you. And I have often found that after that, I have been moved out of that very apartment that I had thanked the walls. It's as if it says, okay, I am ready to release you to a larger version and vision of yourself.
I exactly what you have laid out for exercises or rituals you can do. I am adapting those because I loved everything that you just laid out. That appreciation for yourself, for those that came before you, and everything that you're saying is just what you were talking about earlier about reflecting, like taking a moment to pause, go within, and show gratitude to your being, because if it wasn't for, you know, this body, we wouldn't be here. So to show gratitude to that, giving thanks to those who, I love it. I'm definitely going to do that as we approach the winter solstice for sure.
You know, we're almost out of time, aren't we?
we're getting close. I told you time was gonna go by fast.
I know, and I was like an hour. So in terms of there being cycles and cycles, there is what's going on in the cosmos. Then there's what's going on in what we call the world. And if I take one of the bad things that we generally agree is bad, I take COVID again. That COVID is happening in the outside world. However, when I'm courageous, I can acknowledge that it is a manifestation of a part of me. Now, don't go there if this is like creeps you out. But in other words, I say, well, I was going to pick ISIS. That might be a little easier. Like when the ISIS people were cutting off heads, and that was terrifying to me. And I began to accept that there was a part of me that was like that. Now, I have never cut off anybody's head. I don't even have a knife sharp enough to do it. My knives barely will cut onions, okay? But I had to accept that this was in the world because I was part of one and many who attracted it. And so rather than focus on how unreasonable and awful and stupid and ignorant they are, I say, where am I recalcitrant? Where am I resentful? Where am I so angry that I would kill? And that if I can understand the ways in which I may not be as loving as the ideal, if I can heighten my own tolerance, acceptance of others, then I am withdrawing the energy from ISIS or COVID, because it is a manifestation of the collective, even though we are not conscious of it.
Right.
And so I say, okay, COVID, tell me what you got to say.
Right.
All right. I'ma listen. What's the wisdom? What can you tell me? Like I think age taught me, and sometimes I learn these things and I forget them, but I think age, when it first came up, and anything that I go, I'm afraid of, I know that's the thing I need to deal with. That taught me something about my own sexuality and the parts of myself I may have disowned or rejected. And so that age was, I took that to be a message. Now, I'm not saying it is a message, and don't give me any more. I've got enough messages, God, thank you. But by meeting it, by facing that fear and accepting it as being an outpicturing of maybe perhaps even thoughts that I have had, I find it helps me to not be afraid. To be safe, but not resistant. And I say, what is the wisdom? I did that with my hysterectomy. I didn't want them just to rip my womb out and toss it wherever they toss dead body parts. But I did paintings about it because I knew it was that those fibroids were telling me something. What do you have to say? And that was, of course, something growing in me, but I believe it is the same for structures without, that they are living embodiments of thoughts about which we are unconscious. And the world has gotten to the place where it is because we've participated in it. And it's so much easier to point the finger at them. But to own that and then ask where I can do better, where can I have less hate?
Right.
Now, there's power.
two things popped in my head when you said that, as far as, what's happening external, what is that teaching us? And I know when COVID, I don't know if this video is probably going to have, and so we're only talking about COVID. We're not talking about the other thing, the V word, as it relates to COVID. But it made me think about when people were saying like how it would affect the ability to breathe. And as you know, in yoga spaces, what are we always talking about? The breath, understanding the power of the breath, feeling the breath go in through your nose, and like we take that for granted. And so now starting to, for us to then, COVID has really made us start to pay attention to our breath, to our breathing, the importance of our breath, taking a moment for that pause. And so that's one way that I, when you're talking about like,
what's
the message, okay, sorry about that. So it was, so that taking a moment to pause, feel your breath, the importance of your breath, feeling how you need your breath to move through this world. And so, and the other part that you meant when you mentioned Isis, and it's like, how am I connected? Because you're right, we are all a part of one body. So it made me think, if some people were like, well, I would never, hurt somebody with like with a knife or something like that. But how many of us, we heard of that term, like that person cut me down with their words, right?
You better go ahead, teach, guys. Exactly.
So it made me think of that, and the damage that's done. That that person may have survived that interaction with someone that cut them down with their words, but inside they could be emotionally dead. They could just be. So when you said that, those two things popped in my head.
Wow. Well, I feel like you just gave me a reading. I'm going to be more kind with my sharp tongue.
No, so in class you did can I tell you, I know we're getting close in time, and I know we're talking about the winter solstice, but I had to say this. When you did the reading in class, I was amazed how my personally was on the paper, my natal chart that you were reading. And I told Dwayne afterwards, I was like, I just got read. I mean, I got, and it's just so amazing how connected we are to the cosmos. Like there isn't a separation. There isn't this nature over there and man over here.
That's right.
And so, and I think through your class is when I got it. How I heard it so many times. I read it so many times. I heard other people say it. But in that moment where, we were in class together and I was just like, she got that from reading the planets. That it just had it had a different impact. I don't know, maybe I was more receptive or something, but it was just like, we are connected. There is no separation. So with this summer solstice coming in, it's time for us to slow down. We are part of nature, so we need to just slow down during this season as well, just as nature is doing, to prepare for the next season, or to prepare for this journey through the winter solstice.
And to prepare, for a new world. Sometimes I say, if the world changed to a big extent, what could change for me that would make me unhappy? Like there were no more eggs, because that's my favorite food. But it just helps me to begin to trim down my stuff. Just to see what would I do? Well, I would live, and it helps me to see how rich I am, and that how much I have to give. and to become less of even an energetic hoarder, to become more aware that you know, what happens to people who have fires? And I don't need that demonstration, thank you. Sometimes you gotta talk to God. It's like, I got it. But what do they always say? I have my life. And I will also, I'm beginning to look at that we also have life when we leave our bodies. And so that we can relax about it. Become curious, become open, to know that when you say we're all one, so is the ending and beginning one. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard to say what the ending is and what the beginning is, because it is so seamless. And we need not be afraid. And if we are, then we need to have compassion for ourselves and understand that any emotion that we have, which is violent, and fear is a violent emotion, don't believe it.
Yeah.
I feel fear, but I don't believe you. I don't believe you. That opens the way for faith. And a believing that will support and transport and carry you through anything life throws at you.
Wow. I don't know what to say. That was so beautifully spoken. So beautifully said. And I think during this time is so necessary, right? Because I think it is easy to operate out of that space of fear, especially if you're watching news or if you're on social media. You are bombarded with, these are the number of people that have died so far. These are the number of people, like it is just constant. And then with the 24-hour news cycle. So you're so right. It's even if, I say limit media and news intake. If you can just avoid it, you want to know what's going on, but just sitting and watching the news, I think is a hazard to your health. But if you can just take
I agree with you, Kai. I agree with you. That which you focus on has more power over you.
Right.
So I tune in enough to know that, okay, we can't go to restaurants. I may need some basic information, but to become absorbed emotionally with other people's emotions and people trying to sell TV commercials, and they have to make it bad because that's how they can get people to watch. I limit it. I limit it. And I also understand that those things affect our vibration. I used to love, oh God, I'm going to tell everybody. I used to love those like murder mystery things on TV. The housewife who got killed and who killed it and how I used to true crime. I used to love it. And as I grew, as I meditated and increased my prayer and my meditation, my spiritual life, my spiritual study, I found that I didn't like it anymore. And often, I didn't have to say, quit. Like I knew it was bad for me, all along. I knew I shouldn't, but I just wanted to. So I did. But there came a time when I had grown to the point where I could no longer tolerate it. And that's a good thing, because those things have energy. They are alive. Not the people on the top. The ideas are alive. And when we indulge, we'd be better to take 10 fifths of rum, and don't do that, y'all. But, because we're taking in poison. We're taking
Yes.
poison into our system.
Mm-hmm.
That affects the way we think, even though we don't know that we're living with that kind of fear.
It's so
ruling us.
true. It's so true. And so and I know we're getting down on time now, and I just want to say, in addition to what you're seeing from news, social media, you also probably have friends, family, like, did you just hear? Did you just see? And so in order for you to, like you said, take a moment and say, okay, I have a choice of feeling this fear or not. Because some people are like, why aren't you afraid? Right? You should be scared. But to know that, no, I still have a choice to decide how I'm going to allow this to impact me mentally, emotionally, and physically. And putting up those healthy boundaries to just say, no. So I love what you said with that. And I love the exercises or rituals, if you will, or practices that people can incorporate during this winter solstice season. And I wanted to make sure, did we capture all of what you had as far as?
Yeah, the aesthetics are important.
Mm-hmm.
Flowers in the house,
Mm-hmm.
Receptacles with water, and I'd be moving into more perhaps spiritual practices, which are I couldn't really explain them, but bring light into the house. Get some lights from the 99-cent store. And just put them on a hook and plug them in if you're not into making a design. Bring light and life, flowers, plants, take a bowl of water, cut flowers, put flowers in it. Have your house smelling good, incense, sage, whatever it is you like. And make up your bed every single day. It is like watering your mind. Even if the clothes are still on the floor, because you can't get to that because you got to get on the Zoom. Make up your bed and make up your mind.
I love it. I love it, Deborah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
You're so welcome. It's my pleasure, privilege, and my joy.
Thank you so much. And if people are interested in reaching out to you, how can they connect with you?
Email is excellent. visioncarriers@aol.com. I know the AOL dates me. The Victory ISIONCARRIERS@AOL.com.
Okay, thank you so much. And your web address is in the description box, so people can reach out to you that way. I will also add your email to have as well, so that people can contact you for your artwork, also for a reading or to learn astrology, because I recommend for people that are interested in learning astrology, I recommend for them to take your course. I have learned so much, and I think what I loved about it is, like I said, like I learned that deep connection to me and there was and how I guess it's not so much about, oh, this planet is here and this is like, okay, this is how a planet is moving energetically in my chart. And this is how I now need to move, I thought it was extremely helpful. So I do recommend for people to register for the class.
Wow. Thank you, Kai.
Yes, I loved it. I loved it. So everyone, thanks for those who are joining. We have people kind of signing off and on, but thank you for listening, subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Please also share. If you want to learn more about me and my services, please go to kaimarie.com. And I will see you here next Tuesday at 8 p.m. for the Healing Element podcast. Thank you all.
That's so welcome.